All right, second lesson from lesson 16. Lesson 1, we talked about Lewis and Clark expedition, and we ended it by talking about Zebulon Pike and what he did. So some of the explorers that went out west. In today's lesson, we're going to take a look at some more groups that are going to head out west. We're going to discuss the groups of people that traveled west. We'll take a look at them, and then why. Why did they go out west? And traveling west was dangerous. So let's take a look. Mountain men. The first white individuals that moved to the west were mountain men. These were gentlemen who lived all by themselves in nature. And they went out there and they lived on their own. Some of them lived with Native American tribes. Some of them married Native American women. In some cases, the Native Americans taught them how to survive in the wilderness. And what were they looking for? They were trappers. They were traders. The animal that they preferred was the beaver. Okay, back in Europe at this time, there was a large demand for the beaver fur. People wanted the hats made out of it. And so that was the animal that was prized by the mountain men. And the whole year they would live on their own. They would be isolated from everyone else. But come July, they would have what is known as a rendezvous. A rendezvous means get together. And the mountain men would bring all the furs that they had trapped and skinned that previous year, and they would bring them to the rendezvous. And then traders from the east would come and they would trade for the furs. They would give the mountain men the supplies that they would need for the rest of the year. Ammunition, weapons, cooking utensils possibly. After the trading was done, the rest of the rendezvous was spent with competitions between the mountain men, wrestling competitions, knife throwing competitions, axe throwing competitions, and then it would last a number of days, and when it was done, the mountain men would go back and do what they did for the rest of the year until the next rendezvous. And then around the 1840s, the beaver are going to start getting scarce, and the mountain men are, what else are they going to do? They became guides to all the settlers that were heading west. And so that's what the mountain men did. And two of the more famous mountain men are going to be Jedediah Smith and Jim Beckworth. Jedediah Smith is credited with discovering the South Pass in Wyoming. And I'm going to show it to you on a map in a little bit. But the South Pass was a pass that was wide enough, and it didn't go high up in the mountains, so it wasn't too steep, but it was wide enough for the wagons that the settlers heading west would be riding in, they could fit through. All right. Jim Beckworth also discovered a pass that the settlers would use. This pass was in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And this would be for settlers heading to California, which is going to be one of the groups we're going to be talking about today. Missionaries were one of the groups that headed out west. And the missionaries, we mentioned Marcus and Narcissa Whitman in a previous video. And then you're going to have Henry and Eliza Spalding. These two couples, missionaries, and remember a missionary, what they want to do is they want to convert Native Americans to become Christians. And so these two couples headed west. They both ended up in Oregon. Marcus and Narcissa Whitman ended up trying to convert the Cayuse Indians, and Henry and Eliza Spalding worked with the Nez Perce Indians. And the Spaldings are going to have more success than the Whitmans. Spaldings will be able to convert some of the Native Americans, but the Whitmans, they had a tough time. The Cayuse Indians weren't really interested in converting. They were more interested in what tools and what weapons they could get from Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. And not a lot of Indians are going to be converted. But tragically for Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, Marcus is going to be treating a number of Indians for diseases that they would get from white settlers. And so the Cayuse Indians would see Marcus treating both Indians and white settlers. The white settlers always got better. They were used to these diseases. The Indians were dying, and the Cayuse Indians thought that Marcus was killing them. They kill him, and then they kill Narcissa. So things didn't work out too well for the Whitmans. But the missionaries were the first white settlers really to go out into the Oregon country. What they were most successful at was recruiting more settlers to come to Oregon by the reports that they would send. Marcus actually, at one point, heads back to out east, and when he comes back, he leads a wagon train to the Oregon country. So that's the missionaries. And this is the Oregon Trail. This is what the settlers would have followed. Started in Independence, Missouri. A number of trails started in Independence, Missouri. People heading west could go there, buy the materials they needed, meet up with other people going their way, and form wagon trains, and then go all the way to Oregon. Another group that moved out west, and they're going to end up in Utah, were the Mormons. And the Mormons were a controversial group. They belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which was founded in 1830 by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Smith. They were controversial right from the get-go. They're going to be kicked out of New York, Ohio, Missouri, Illinois. They're kicked out of all those states. They had a couple different beliefs that people just didn't buy into. The first one was everything that their community had, they shared. If I own a wagon and John Doe needs to use my wagon, he can use my wagon. When we grow vegetables, it's for everyone. Okay, not a radical idea, but one of their beliefs. It's this next belief that's going to get people a little bit angry with the Mormons, and that is that the Mormons practice what is known as polygamy. A man could have more than one wife. Didn't go over well with the neighbors. And that's why they're going to be kicked out of New York and Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois. Yeah, not good. In 1844, Joseph Smith is going to be killed by an angry mob. It's not a way you want to die, being killed by an angry mob. You've done something wrong if you're going to be killed by an angry mob. A gentleman by the name of Brigham Young is going to take over, and he's smart enough to say, hey, we need to find somewhere. We need to go somewhere where we can be by ourselves and we can practice our religion in isolation. And that is where Utah comes in handy. And he's going to move his followers to Utah so that they can practice their religion in peace and in isolation. And they do. And they settle near the Salt Lake, and the Great Salt Lake, and they set up Salt Lake City, but they're in a desert. They got to learn how to dig canals. They got to learn how to irrigate fields. They got to learn how to build canals. They got to get the water that comes from the mountains and direct it towards the fields, and they do. Salt Lake City becomes very successful in the desert. And in 1877, you have 125,000 Mormon settlers living in Utah in 500 different cities and settlements. It was a success. If you go to Utah today, chances are the person you're going to be talking to is a Mormon. And currently there are 11 million members worldwide. So this is a success story. And for the Mormons, they started out from a city called Nauvoo, Illinois, shortly after Joseph Smith was killed by that angry mob, and they head out and create the settlement of Salt Lake City. Next group we want to talk about are the 49ers. This is a group that's going to head to California, and it's going to start because in 1848, a gentleman by the name of James Marshall, working on building a sawmill, looks down in the river, sees something shiny, it's gold. By the time word got out, it was 1849, and people heard about gold in California, and they went. Tens of thousands of people wanted to get rich in California. Most were young men, not a lot of women out there. It was young men, out they went, they were going to get rich. So tens of thousands of people, and this is a worldwide thing. People from Europe, people from Australia, people from China, Mexico, Central America, they all went there. Became a very dangerous place. If you were leaving from the United States, if you lived on the East Coast of the United States, you want to go to California, there were 3 different ways to get there. Seriously. First one, you could go across the United States, but then you're going through deserts, you're going through mountains. It's going to take a while, all right? 2 other ways. You could jump on a boat in New York City or on the East Coast, and you could go through the Caribbean Sea, and right there in Panama, you could get off the boat, you could walk across the Panama, the Isthmus of Panama, and then you get back on the Pacific Ocean, and up you go. Right? Third way, you could get on a ship on the East Coast, and you could go all the way around South America, and then come all the way back to California. Now, I would probably take the overland route, but dangerous, could take a while. But those are the 3 routes that people who lived in the United States took to get to California. Now, when it got to California, most people, they didn't find gold, all right? And if you found gold, you better keep quiet about it, because California was a dangerous place. This is one method of finding the gold. It's called sluicing. You take all you just dig up a whole bunch of soil, you put it in there, and there are ridges in the bottom of the sluice. You put water down there, and what the water is going to do is it's going to move the lighter material, but the heavier material, such as gold nuggets, would remain. All right? And you can see that they don't have really much admiration for the environment. All right? They were just looking for gold. Another way you would do it was panning for gold. You could take a pan and dip it into the river and then shake it. And once again, there were little holes in the bottom, and so the lighter material is going to stick out, but those gold nuggets, they're going to stay in there. And then lastly, hydraulic mining. They would just spray the heck out of a side of a hill that would come collapsing, and then you could go and you could use the sluice. All right, so different methods that people out west are going to use while mining for gold. Dangerous though. With that many people heading to California all at once, there was no police force. All right, so you had a lot of vigilantes. And there was one report that within a 24-hour period in this one place, they had hangings, murders, duels, angry mobs. They had whippings. They had pretty bad accidents, all within 24 hours. There's no police force. Because it was so dangerous, because there were so many people, California skips the territory stage. They go right to becoming a state. And in 1850, they're going to become a state. In 1852, the gold rush is pretty much over. But let's talk about some of the effects on Native Americans and foreigners. I said a lot of people from other countries came over, and they weren't wanted in the mining camps. So the foreign miners tax was passed. Foreign miners had to pay $20 a month to be able to just mine, and so they couldn't afford it. So the authorities would come into a mining camp, foreigners would just scatter, just take off, and not well liked on the mining camps. The effect on Native Americans, well, all these miners, they didn't care who lived on the land. They came, they were looking for gold. And when the Native Americans came into contact with these white settlers or white adventurers, they would get diseases and die. So Native Americans were dying and they were losing land, and not good, not good. The Chinese were kicked out of the mining fields, weren't wanted there. So they ended up starting restaurants, starting laundries, working on railroads. They found other things that they could do. Matter of fact, the oldest Chinatown in the United States is in San Francisco, California. And it's been there since gold rush times. So we talked about a few different groups. We talked about the Mormons, the 49ers, the missionaries, the mountain men, Lewis and Clark. And if we take a look at all the trails heading west, in green is the Oregon Trail, Independence, Missouri. All right. And you can notice that some of these trails are going to go through the same area. Right here is the South Pass. Jedediah Smith, remember, discovered the South Pass that the wagons could pass through. You've got the Mormon Trail going through it. You got the Oregon Trail going through it. That's where the California Trail is going to start. So you have all these different groups heading out west for those different reasons that we just talked about. Have a good day.